million. So the
Giving
test
it to-
administrators have come in and sold a nice bill of goods.
Right.
And you start whittling down some of those standardized tests, I think it's a state out west, I think it's Utah, maybe it's New Mexico, it's one of those. They've done something that I'd like to see happen here. They have a moratorium, 5 years, they've done away with all standardized testing. They just wanna see what happens.
Yeah,
Do our schools fall apart? Do our kids become dum-dums? And I thought, wow, that might not be a bad thing to try here. Let's just do away with them and see what happens.
Don't
Well,
the
then how do
Europeans
you
mostly do
tell
that?
whether they've learned more or less?
I don't know.
Unless you give them a standardized test.
Well, I have to, and I have to look into see, they may have
Yeah.
like one test, I don't know, but the point is, they're doing
Right.
away with tons of them.
I mean, when I was that age, there was, one, I think it was the end of 11th grade or something, there was a nationwide test that everybody
Oh,
took.
I
And that
remember
was sort
that,
of
yeah, I
a
remember that.
determinant of, getting into college and things like that. And-
SAT or something.
Well,
And
there's,
that-
yeah, there's the ACT and whatnot for college, that I get.
No,
And
but there
I'm
was
even
a
okay
standardized
with-
test
Yeah.
that we all had to take.
And it makes sense, you have a standardized test, but my point is,
Yeah.
everybody relies on we've gotta have these standardized tests. My question is, do we? And I just
I
give them
think-
credit for saying it, however they're doing it. Let's see what happens.
I don't know that that's a big issue around here, because I really haven't talked to teachers and so on, but,
May I have?
Yeah.
And none of them can go on the record because it's going against
I
them.
know, I
But
know,
they're
I
all
know.
against them.
but I do think another problem that exists in this area is a shortage of fully certified teachers, and you have situations where, I know the state allows somebody with 60 hours of college to work as a substitute. And we have situations where the substitute is filling in for the whole semester or the whole year because they can't find somebody that's fully qualified. And that's definitely got to do with pay. I mean, one of the things about Leelanau County is high housing values. And you hear about teachers who, they live in a rental that they have to move out of in the summer so that, the owner can put vacationers in there at a much higher rental. I mean, if you don't have a situation where they can afford to live here, then, it's gonna be hard to find people.
Well, but that also moves to another topic of affordable housing.
Yeah, right.
And Leelanau County has some issues there because of
Yeah.
some different zoning.
Right.
By township, you've got to have, how many acres? Well, you're not going to put an affordable house on 5 acres,
Or 10.
Or 10.
And we're in an area where there's actually a bunch of land that requires 10 acres for
So
building.
Those are things, when you talk
Yeah.
about affordable housing, that
Yeah.
you also have to look at is, can we,
Yeah, they're crazy, but it's
Yeah,
very hard to
In
change.
addition to that, these 60-hour substitute teachers, there is through a site called EduStaff. I know because I used to work for that
Yeah.
system, and that's something that they've got their own issues in that program itself. There's definitely a lot of issues with that as well, I think. So
Right.
there's work to be done
I'm,
there.
I'm wondering too whether isn't time to reconsider the formulas we use for school funding, because those seem to end up with vastly different amounts for different schools and per child. And-
Well-
And that,
the Republicans'
Yeah.
budget has a 2X formula to continue. The governor was at 1.5. We're trying to bring that back
Okay.
up, and we have been now for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So we are trying to equalize that per pupil.
right.
To get it to everybody's the same.
To get back to the road situation, have you identified certain roads or projects here in your district that you consider your priorities when we do start moving forward with getting road improvements?
I have not, but as part of the, every county has to have their asset map management plan. So every county has done that, and I would go with their suggestions because
Okay.
they're obviously the people following them. So that is one of the things that I think is important is when it comes to funding roads. Michigan is the most restrictive state in how it allows its locals, or doesn't allow its locals to raise their own revenues. Everything pretty much comes from the state. The only way locals
Yeah.
can raise funds is through a property tax. Then only homeowners landowners
Yeah.
are paying those taxes as opposed to others. So there are ways to allow locals to raise their own funds and give them more flexibility. There's also just not raising any more funds, but right now, MDOT has rules that say, hey, any money we give the county, there has to be 60% of it goes to primary roads, 40% to secondary roads. Well, my thought is, our committee's thought is, all right, we'll use Leelanau County. Leelanau County, here's your money. If you follow your asset management plan, fix whatever roads you need fixed, as opposed to this money has to go to these certain roads because the state says they have to.
Okay.
We're saying, hey, each county, you know your priorities, fix them. If this road's the worst and a primary road isn't as bad, we'll spend it on the road that needs fixing. So 100% of the money we give you can go to the roads you need fixed as opposed to the roads the state tells you should get fixed.
Okay.
And that just seems a smarter way to do things. Another way to let the locals have more flexibility is a thing called forced account limits. And the way that works is, right now, a county can only spend up to $100,000 without bidding out a job.
Oh,
The
yeah.
idea is that when times are really good, you've got local contractors, those sorts of things that can be making that money, so let's bid that job out so that private industry and folks can get jobs. Well, we're heading into and are in a crunch time where there's not enough workers. So those workers will get plenty of work. Let's raise that account limit up to $500,000 so that the county road commissions can do more work without having to bid it out, because those private contractors are gonna have plenty of jobs coming because we are in a crunch. So that would give the locals more flexibility.
Yeah, Senator Vanderwall mentioned that he saw the labor shortage as being one of the biggest issues on getting
Yeah.
the roads fixed, is because you may have big construction companies down in Detroit, but up here in Leelanau County, we've got Elmer's and we've got,
Ruth Riley.
Bob's. You know, we don't have a lot of companies that can fix all of the roads.
Yeah,
So that is a challenge.
It is, and there's a lot of challenges
Yeah.
with regards to it. There's a discussion now about aggregates. Do we have enough aggregates available
Oh, yeah.
to fix the roads? There are mines out there, but as we're gearing up the road process, is there enough? That's a debate that's on. So here's another one that we want to change. This one is a small one, but it kind of gives you, I think, a classic feel. Each county in the snowy areas gets a certain amount of money to plow their roads. Well, that's all based on the average from 1987 back 14 years.
yeah.
So we've got policy legislation that would say, how about we change that to last year back 14
Right,
years?
Yeah.
Makes more sense.
You know what I'm saying? But that's the rule they're working under because nobody
Yeah.
looked at it.
Well, I think here in Leelanau County that our county road commission does a good job as far as I've been able to observe. But it does seem that the big issue remains, the budgetary one, because we have limits at the state level, and it's pretty clear that, the feds they've gotten nowhere on a so-called infrastructure plan, and I don't see them getting anywhere in the near future either. So we can't hope for any help from them.
Well,
And-
they're talking about raising the national gas tax from, I think it's 18.4 cents. There's talk of raising it, which they haven't done since, I think it's the early
Yeah.
90s. So the way I look at this is, when it comes to roads, the governor has her 45-cent gas tax, which only 1.9 million would go to roads. The rest she's pulling out for other budgetary things. The Republicans are pushing that all the money paid at the pump would go to the roads, so that sales tax would get shifted to the road fund. We'd stop charging a we'd stop charging a sales tax and it would become part of the gas tax, excise tax.
But that takes it away from the education.
Right.
Yes, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And here's what we've done is we're bringing, there's real debate about higher education and how much we're spending on the University of Michigan and MSU. We would bring 500 million back from the higher education and put it back, because we've taken it out of the K through 12 budget and we've given it to higher education. We're gonna take a portion of that back, 500 million. Then you look at, if you're familiar, they call it the Wayfair Act. Are you familiar with that? Most people
No.
aren't. So a couple of years ago, there was a court case, and now Michigan is gonna charge sales tax on internet purchases. And last year, it brought in 143 million. It's expected to continue to go up. So we would add that, make it a pure sales tax, and that would go to the school aid fund. So.
K-12, right?
K-12.
Yeah.
And so it would go there. So we would make up any monies that the sales tax from gasoline would leave. We're filling that up, making it, holding it harmless, as they call it. And though our education budget might not be massively increased, it still is increased from last year's spending. So the gas tax shift would not, in theory, take it, because we've moved it back. And one of the things I hear a lot about in my short time in Lansing is the shell game. And I don't have the charts with me, but if this budget were to go through as planned, things become actually straighter. There are always gonna be a shell game in Lansing, borrowing from here to pay there. I'm not gonna try and snow you, it happens. It happens with our own budgets at home, you know, sometimes you gotta move money to move here.
Sure.
But this plan would say, hey, gas money goes to roads, here's sales tax goes to schools, higher education gets what it's
I
getting.
think one of the things about Whitmer's plan that isn't made very clear to most people is, from what I understand, that 45 cents or percent,
45 cents.
45 cents was going to be phased in over 10 years.
No, it's 18 months.
Oh, okay,
It would be, basically in the blink of an eye, it's 45 cents a
okay.
year and
Yeah, that's a
however
lot.
months. So it'd be quick.
Yeah.
That would also make us the highest gas sales, gas tax in the country. The other thing that I learned here just about a week ago, Michigan right now, if you look at taxes paid at the pump, is 6th in the nation. It's a lot.
It's already high.
Point, though, is if you take out the sales tax, because that's not going to roads, we drop to 14th.
Oh,
So in theory, in roads to money, we're the 14th most taxed, if that makes sense. So I
But
think
does
that's,
everybody agree that we need more money for roads and that the best place to get it is with a tax at the pump and just,
the
you know?
the answer to that is yes, for now. I think everybody realizes that this is a plan that, back in 1950, gas at the pump tax had a life expectancy of forever. I think everybody realizes that this plan there's a sunset because of electric
Right,
vehicles and
yeah,
that sort of
right.
thing. So I think
that's why I
at
wish
this
fleet
moment,
economy, you know.
at this moment, this is the best answer we have. The next thing we have to do, and one of the things, somebody asked me, they said, well, now you're done with your how you build a highway hearings, what are you gonna do next? And I said, well, I think one of the things we need to do is get the electric car companies in and find out where they're going, how it's happening, and when do they think we're gonna be up and running, so that we can
Get them to
look-
build plants here?
Well, well, you know, Michigan is becoming the
Right.
kind of the epicenter for electric and autonomous vehicle design and research.
Right.
So
Yeah.
hopefully that follows. But the point is, you're right. It isn't a forever thing. But the next step is, all right, let's secure it for now. But we have to realize that the plan is changing and we have to look at it realistically. And so,
It
you know, the
seems
funny
like-
thing is, the question
yeah.
is how long though? I mean, the auto industry, I've heard them say, well, the next gasoline-powered car you buy will be your last. Well, maybe it is.
Could be.
But it could also be another 30 years. We don't know. We have to get a realistic guess as to when that'll happen.
I think there's been talk about applying fees to the electric vehicles as a way to make up the shortage in gasoline taxes. But, you know, the nice thing about the gasoline tax is that it depends on how much driving you do, right? You know, the more you drive, the more you spend on the gasoline
Yeah,
tax.
and whether your car is
And
fuel
the-
efficient
and
or
the more-
not, you can
It's a
avoid it
user
if
fee.
you
And the
want.
more wear you're putting on the road.
Yeah.
So it's hard to have any sort of measurement like that for an electric car, but you could have something based on weight. I mean, for example, Teslas are heavy cars. You know, I got a ride in one with a friend recently. They weigh 4,000 pounds. So, you know, you could base a
And the-
tax on weight.
Those are things that have to be looked
Yeah,
at. That's
right.
what we're saying
Yeah.
is, right
Now,
at this
there's a-
moment, don't know.
It may be possible since, you know, they seem to know where the car is at any moment, you know, and probably they know
Yeah,
how
but-
far it's gone and on whose roads, you know, whether you were in Indiana or whether you were in Michigan.
Well, do we?
You probably, you know, if you got past the big brother aspect of all this.
That's-
which
Might
is
be
that's
really
the
very hard to
problem.
do.
Scary for me, really
That's the
scary for
problem.
me. 'cause
I don't want
like
the
to even have a
state-
cell phone
I don't
on
I
have
me.
don't
a
want
big
the
brother.
state
I wanna keep
following
it
me
there.
around wherever I go. You
I
know?
know, but
They're
there'll
testing
come a
that.
time when,
They're
you know, they
testing
could
that
just
in
say, you
Oregon.
drove 8,000 miles on Michigan roads last year, and I don't know, you know.
Well, one of the beautiful things
Subtract it
about,
from your account.
one of the beautiful things about the United States is that, as they say, each state can be a little incubator, and Oregon is testing that right now.
Are they?
So that'll be a good chance to see how does it work.
Yeah.
But yes,
But it's the only, I mean, it's one of the ways to get around that electric cars where you charge them up at home or you don't, you know, they don't know where
well,
you're
the other
charging
funny
them up.
thing, we did, in the Energy Committee, we did have the electric car folks in to talk, and I had done this, it's kind of the road nerd I've become, is I stopped at one of those Tesla things, because I used to pump gas.
Charging station at the Myers or something?
When I was in high school, I pumped gas.
Yeah.
So I am acutely aware of how it works at the pump. So I looked, you know, and all it is an electric plug. So I said to these fellas, I said, all right, I get it. Right now, basically that electricity's free. There's only a few cars out there. You want to encourage it, so you're free. I said, somewhere along the line,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to start charging for that
They
electricity.
do charge at many of the charging stations in California now, because California has about half of the electric cars in the country and a lot more charging stations than we have. But I just read an article that is kind of, you know, makes you think twice about getting an electric car. This was, a couple of journalists decided to try a trip from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, which is, you know, like something a lot of people do.
Here to Chicago, so to
Round
speak.
trip.
Yeah.
They spent 8 hours driving and 5 hours charging. And that was because the types of chargers that are out there are not standardized. Some take longer than others to fully charge your
Yep.
car. And also at one of the stations, they got the last slot and somebody showed up right after. You know, now that person is gonna have to wait for someone
Right.
else to leave. So that
Yeah.
adds time to the wait time for charging.
And I don't, I just like to look at all aspects, and one of
Yeah.
the things that, and I even asked these gents that were in with the cars, and they did not have a very good answer for me. I said, one of the criticisms, and I'm not picking.
Yeah.
I mean, I figure whatever works, works, but I said, one of the criticisms I hear about electric cars is that, well, one of the positives is, oh, they're green, they save the earth. I said, but I've also heard criticism that they're strip mining Africa to get the lithium for those batteries.
Yeah.
And do you know who owns those mines?
I have no idea.
The North Koreans.
So, but I don't know how green those are, you know, when you're strip
Yeah.
mining.
Did not know that.
It all just, you
Well,
know,
Sure, the
and he didn't have an
materials
answer. It's like, okay, I got it, you know, it all works.
I think though that one thing we're gonna have to come to grips with sooner or later is our abysmal system of public transportation. And so if it takes 8 hours to drive to Las Vegas and back and 5 hours to charge your car.
But-
Hey, wouldn't you like to get on a high-speed train and get there
But
quickly?
here's an interesting thing. As it stands right now, public transportation is working fairly efficiently in the Detroits and the Flints and
yeah.
the Saginaw's, because there's people.
Big areas, urban.
Here in northern Michigan, the subsidy per rider is over $100 per ride. And I could find out what the exact is, but I know it's $100+. So every time somebody gets in and pays their $3 or $4, unless they're qualified for less and they only pay $1 or $2, which I'm not arguing, but that subsidy kicks in. So, personally, I look at how maybe public transit should work in our region, and I'll use the 101st, our
Yeah.
4 counties, is what if we went regional so that you could get on a bus in Northport and go all the way to Ludington if you needed to? The problem with that is territorial. Because right now, there's local millages to support that. So
Right.
now the folks in Leelanau, Benzie, Manistee, and Mason, well, we pay more than the guys in Leelanau, screw them. It becomes a real territorial battle that somehow we have to overcome as well.
Yeah.
So I think I don't disagree with you, but we got a lot of battles to
Yeah.
fight to
I
get
think
that.
the
You know
fact
effect.
that in the 1930s, you could get to almost any town in Michigan by train, and cheaply.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
So-
The fact that we voted last year to increase the millage shows that we're very interested in investing in that. So, and it was a pretty wide margin of the people that passed the millage. But there was a proposal for an 8%, in the budget, an 8% decrease in the Beta and Benzie bus funding, which you voted for.
Yes, and I could explain that, but go ahead.
And you said that in the end, it probably would be fully funded. My concern is that 26% of the people who ride Beta in this area are poor, the elderly, or the disabled. And they're using that public transportation to get to doctor's appointments, to jobs, to the grocery store, so that they can lead.
Pharmacies.
Yeah, pharmacies, so that they have the freedom to still live an independent life. And to me, it's a point of freedom, so that they don't have to rely on family to get anywhere, so that they can live independently. And so my concern is that we make sure that at the end of the day, that you're not voting for the party, but you're voting for the people of this district.
So, as I explained, when that vote happened, immediately I called all 4 public transit directors to explain my vote. And I made my now remember, in the budget process, there's the House budgets, the Senate budgets, and the governor's budgets. And they all 3 come together and they hash it out. So when that vote happened, the transportation budget was the public transit budget was part of the transportation budget. As chairman of transportation, I know the things that we're doing and want to get done, knowing also that this was just the beginning point of negotiations. So I couldn't vote against the entire budget, but I did not like the public transit. So I made it known to those in charge that I am not in favor of that part of it. I want and will fight to get all of that restored. I've talked to the folks on the Senate side, and I've talked to the folks on our side. And again, I can't promise you exact penny and cent,
Sure.
but that money will get restored. And so I voted for the whole budget, not just a portion of it. And I am fighting to get that and making sure that that money gets restored. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes.
And because that was the first step in what's gonna unfortunately probably be a little longer process.
Budget gamesmanship gets in the way all the time, right?
Well,
It's the process.
it is. I mean, it's like you're buying a house. I'm asking this, you bid this, and we meet somewhere in the middle. That's part of it, It's just the way it is. And that, just in general, one of the terms about politics, that people say it's like watching sausage get made. Well, politics isn't like everything else. In the House of Representatives, there are 110 people. I can assure you now, having been there just about 6 months, there are 110 individuals. There are some of them on both sides of the aisle, a little bit of a crackpot. They're firebrands, if you will, and I might not always agree with them. But I don't know everybody on the other side, but I know quite a few Democrats. There's good people there. My vice chair in transportation, we work great together. So, but there is, at some point, even though we work well together, there is a point where you have to, I don't know, choose sides, draw some lines that starts the negotiation. And if you look at the no-fault situation, there were some lines drawn because you have to make your point. But then, in the end, it was a bipartisan agreement. So this is a process. And I understand, I'm glad people let me know how they thought about public transit, because I'm with them. I don't mind hearing from people, but what I tried to assure everybody is, this is the beginning of a process. So just hang on, you've made your points known, I'm with you, I got you, but this is the beginning of a process. And so politics isn't just going to the store or going to the mechanic and saying, how much is it gonna cost? There is a process to it that sometimes I don't think people think about, they react to, if that makes sense.
This is kind of changing the subject, but it seems to me that one other place we might be able to save something in the budget is with a little criminal justice reform. I mean, we've been locking up people for minor things that we've now decided are legal, such as marijuana production, et cetera, et cetera. And some of those people are still serving time. I mean, is there any kind of consideration of commuting sentences for some of those people? I mean,
Well-
if they're nonviolent offenders.
I think so, and there have been some things, but I've talked to enough law enforcement, and this is where I think perception and reality might be two different things. And what I mean by that is, now I'll be honest, I have not sat down and looked through every court case that's
Yeah, right.
happened in the last 20 years. But what law enforcement has told me is that in the last 20 years, marijuana possession, everybody's, they're nabbing people for marijuana possession. Generally speaking, cops didn't even worry about that because it was so minor. What they did
Yeah.
use it for was, though, if you had something and they wanted you for something else, it was a way to get you. So to lock somebody up just
Not
for
everywhere,
marijuana
though.
possession, what's that?
I have a son that was busted down in Thompsonville.
Okay.
Late at night, just coming from Chicago. He and his girlfriend had smoked a joint way back in Indiana somewhere.
Car still smelled.
And he kind of went rolling through a stop sign, and it was past midnight. He was just coming up here, and they had ended up, I don't want to go, a lot of details.
Sure.
The cop was looking to get somebody for something.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's
it
unfortunate.
ended up costing him another trip back up to here just to go to court, had to get an attorney. It was thousands of dollars
Yeah.
for, nothing really.
Yeah.
I mean, while that may be true generally, he
You're right.
wasn't getting busted they weren't wanting him for
Yeah.
drunk driving
So-
or anything else, but couldn't get him.
Yeah.
They found, they had stopped him and they were gonna do something.
Well, and the other
It
part
was really
Yeah,
painful.
the problem is that the budgetary problem, as I see it, is that we spend way more locking a person up than we do on educating them at any level.
Well, and I'm no expert on this,
Yeah.
but from what I've seen, our prison populations are down
Yeah,
because they
that's good.
are doing that. The other thing is they are working harder and harder. There are more programs to educate and train these folks so that when they do get out,
Yeah.
they're not just kick them out. Last night, I watched Shawshank Redemption for about the 800th time.
It is a great movie.
It is a great movie, and I think they're doing more than just saying, hey, go buy groceries at the store.
Yeah.
They are trying to train these people, and I think that that's a good thing. And I think you are seeing, prison reform and all of that good stuff. So the civil asset forfeiture thing got voted through. And that's, unless you're convicted, you
Right.
should not be taking
Exactly.
your goods. So the answer to your question in your
Yeah.
broad question, the broad answer is yes. Things are happening and changing.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I know that people didn't normally go to prison just for having a little bit of personal, marijuana, but they did get people for, growing it and selling it,
Well-
at one point, the mandatory minimum for that was 20 years, and that seems like totally excessive to me,
Here's the thing to be on the lookout for.
yeah,
This really hasn't hit the radar yet, and I'm trying to get in touch with some people to find out more about it. But what I'm hearing is, I'm 100% honest, I did not vote for legalized marijuana, but I knew it was gonna pass.
yeah.
Personally, I voted no, but it's the law now. So what you're starting to see is that while the legalized, I'm talking personal marijuana here, not medical, while that law is getting in place, the black market in Michigan is growing bigger and bigger and bigger because, and people think that's counterintuitive, well, it's gonna be legal. Think about it though. Cigarettes still have a black market because you can get it without the tax.
Right.
And so now that it's legal, we could all be owning it and it's not a problem, but Nick over here can sell it to us cheaper because there's no tax on it. And so the black market is going up. They had a hash bash somewhere here a couple weeks ago I heard about, and they were selling it left and right. Legally, they can't do that, but they were selling it. And my only thought is, everybody's like, well, it's legal now and we can tax it and we can do all of that. Well, then good, let's do it. We've got to crack down on the black market. And for some reason, I don't see a lot of that happening. And it looks to me, like the black market is almost out in the open with it. So I just want to get with people, say, hey, wait a minute here, if this is the law, how are we enforcing it? Because I want every tax dollar to go where the people of Michigan said they wanted it.
Town,
And just to add to that, I think once these recreational shops do open up, like they've been saying, I think it's around 2020, I think that's what's gonna do a good job of curbing the black market.
Actually, no.
You don't think so?
No, I don't.
Really? You think
Well,
that's only-
I'll give you two answers why. Because in Utah,
Yeah.
right, there's a real black market issue out there.
Okay.
Even though and the other is, again, even today, as cigarette smoking is on decline,
Yeah.
there is still a black market for cigarettes because you can get them without
Get
the
'em from
tax.
China from without the tax, yeah, you're right.
And think
Yeah.
about this,
No, that
and
makes
this is
sense.
just, Jack, I got no scientific proof, but I can grow 12 plants.
You're
I
not
can
gonna
grow-
smoke all day, yeah.
I can grow 12 plants, and that's more marijuana in a year
That's
than
quite a
one
bit,
human
right?
being can smoke,
Uh-huh.
Well,
Yeah.
sell a little bit to you, I sell a little bit to you, just making a little money on the side, that's the black
That
market.
is the black, you're
So,
right.
One
it's
thing-
interesting, I don't know how it's
Yeah.
but
gonna
more,
happen.
more and more communities, townships and towns are passing ordinances to prohibit the sale of
Yeah, right,
marijuana.
right.
I mean, regardless of what that particular township voted, some township governments are doing that.
Yep.
So that's gonna naturally make the black market go
Right.
underground and even get bigger.
And
Yeah.
potentially get bigger,
And again, Colorado just, had $1 billion
Colorado,
in
that's
the last 5 years added to their coffers on the tax of marijuana.
Yeah.
$1 billion.
So,
A lot of money.
it is, so, but there's the black market. And so, we're
You
just
know-
talking about things, and that's one of the things that's kind of been brought to my attention that I wanna look into, because again, they're taking money, from our coffers if they're doing it illegally.
I heard the sheriff here in Leelanau County say about a year ago that they don't even bother with marijuana anymore because their big concern is opiates and meth. And that those are the things that, in Northwest Michigan, that's what people are getting busted for, is those two things.
I took a tour of the Manistee County Jail a couple weeks ago. And I've toured Leelanau but I asked them down there, I said, what are the top 3 reasons? I was talking to the guy and the gal that were taking me on the tour, they were the jailers. I said, what are the top 3 reasons people are in jail today? And they laughed and they said, it comes down to alcohol and drugs. Everybody's in here
Yeah.
because of alcohol and drugs.
DUI or drugs.
Or they
Beating your
stole
partner up.
something, They stole
Because
something
were
because they
drunk or
needed to
because
fix
they were
their habit.
needed money or they.
Correct.
Dom-
Alcohol and drugs.
Domestic abuse.
Alcohol and drugs. Alcohol
Fueled
and-
by alcohol.
Everything is alcohol and drugs, and,
I believe that.
that's like, oh, man, and again, I'm no saint, but I don't drink, so I don't care. But I know we tried that getting rid of alcohol there
Yeah,
a
it
few
didn't
years
work.
ago, and it didn't work too good.
Yeah.
But it's a shame that, that happens, and,
I know, yeah.
but it is a problem that we have to deal with.
You got a few minutes for another
Yeah.
big change of subject? I used to be a commercial fisherman, a long time ago. Now I'm a sport fisherman. I just got back from Canada yesterday. I was up on Lake Superior fishing, so I kind of see all sides of this. I'm also on the board of directors of Fishtown Preservation. You probably are aware of that organization. And they're the holders of 2 commercial fishing licenses, the one that used to be owned by the Carlson family and the one that used to be owned by the Lang family. So they have a gill net tug and a trap net boat. There are no commercial fishermen permanently resident here fishing those full-time anymore, but there is a guy named Joel Peterson who licenses those boats and fishes out of Leland. And, one of our purposes is to keep commercial fishing, that heritage, alive in the area. But I did it for about 20 years. So here, I'm here to just sort of make some comments about there's 2 bills. One's either been introduced in the Senate only just last week,
Well, there's 3 in the House.
and Vanderwall is one of the sponsors on that bill, and there is the bill that you're a co-sponsor of in the House. And they kind of have competing visions for how to manage a fishery into the future. And this is a long subject, I don't think very many people actually understand the Great Lakes very well. They think of it as an overgrown Lake Leelanau or whatever, and it is not at all. But the thing specifically that I wanted to comment about is that the designation by statute of walleye and perch and lake trout as forever, well, no statute is forever, but it's hard to change a statute. We have, the current law has not been amended since the 1970s. I can't remember the exact
72, I
date,
believe, is the year.
which is just unbelievable. It's more than time
Correct.
to change the law. But it's also, if you're gonna change the law, let's put forward a new vision of what is responsible management of the entire fishery for the entire people of the state. The fish belong to the people of the state, not just the ones that can buy a sport fishing license. We're not all gonna either have the time or the money or the inclination and interest to go out and get the kind of equipment that you need to, fish safely out on the lakes. So those 3 species meet all of the requirements, or could in the future. They don't meet them all right now because they're not rehabilitated. But in the past, there has to be a market. There has to be a demand as a food fish, and go into any restaurant, that demand never went away. It's still there. I had perch last night at Little Traverse Inn. They probably came from Canada. They don't come from US waters anymore. They need to be, there has to be an overabundance or a harvest surplus that's available, and only the fisheries managers can actually determine what that surplus is. And then there's the opportunity to say, well, who should take that? And here's where I think that designating those fish as game fish by statute, in the hearing, I actually read the transcript of the first hearing, and I actually viewed the video as well. But I didn't see the other one. I was up in Canada fishing, right? So I didn't have time this morning to look at that. But the issue really is these fish don't move around that much. Fish in Grand Traverse Bay are fish in Grand Traverse Bay. Fish in Good Harbor are probably somewhere between the Manitou Islands and Good Harbor, right, off the coast of Leelanau. I'm talking about lake trout specifically, but it's even more true of perch and walleye. They don't move around that much. And so to say, these are always gonna be game fish means that if there is a population surplus of lake trout around Beaver Island, you really, really, really think that 500,000 pounds of lake trout can be harvested in any reasonable manner or any safe manner by people, you know, with boats out around Beaver Island? No, leave it to the fishery managers to determine what's in abundance and where and who can safely take it and who should best take it and in what amounts.
Yeah.
And actually, the second bill, the one that Vanderwall is a co-sponsor of, really kind of takes off most of these arcane, crazy, old regulations and says, basically gives authority completely to the DNR to designate quotas, harvest limits, open season, closed season type of gear. Everything right down to where port that the fish can be landed at, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a good bill, but it would be a big mistake because you're consigning a vast food resource. It's when it comes back, if it comes back. And if it doesn't come back, the fisheries managers aren't gonna have extra abundance to allocate to anybody anyway, so.
Well, I guess what I could tell you is this. I think the process, it's in a process and it's working, and I'll tell you why. Just talking about our bills, Representative Howell was the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. And he had us in the DNR, then the following week he had commercial fisheries
Right.
in. Sarah Cambenzi, who's from the Upper Peninsula, has introduced some amendments to the bill because she's representing some commercial fishermen who've come to her. So I think that's how the process works. You start, then you talk it through, and it's in the process. And everybody I've talked to said, you know, it's gonna take a while because we have to talk it through to get it right. So, I hear what you're saying, I get what you're saying, and I believe it's one of those situations where the commercial fishermen are being brought to the table, the DNR is being at the table, so on and so forth. So, I think the process is
I
working.
think you should press the DNR folks, the fisheries division people, a little bit, because if pressed a little bit, they too, I don't think, would want to list the species that were traditionally commercial fish as exclusively game fish into the future, because it pulls out all of their management levers. You can't say, like, well, let's say theoretically, there's huge stocks of lake trout out around the Manitou Islands, and they're probably depressing
Sure.
other game species and probably whitefish. And that's not a theoretical thing, it happens. The only way, you cannot tell sport fishermen to go out there and bring that population down.
Sure.
You know, you could increase the bag limit, you could take it off completely. So anybody that wants to could hook and line, catch 20 of them a day. They're not gonna be able to make a dent in that. It's not possible.
Why don't we do this? Before you leave, let's get your name and phone number, and I will,
I've got it on here.
oh, he came prepared.
Well, I just wrote down some thoughts. but
Good.
There's a bunch of other stuff in these are very,
Brian, good.
like even the bill that I was looking at, actually, if you take out all the parts that are deletions, you know, it's probably a 15-page bill. That's good compared to 65 pages that it was.
Yeah,
But a lot of this stuff is pretty arcane, you know, and this is knowledge that most people don't have.
Sure.
And they don't think about it rightly, I don't believe.
Yeah.
And what I would love to see, and actually not too many people are talking about this, is that's a vast food resource, potentially. Not while it's all screwed up with zebra mussels or, well, actually quagga mussels now.
Yeah.
But it will come back. The one thing we know for sure is it's always changing.
sure.
So you never want to tie the hands of the people that can respond to new opportunities and enhance that fishery, because there's jobs involved. It's healthy food.
Yeah.
You know, why would you tie your hand? so you can't take advantage of it.
So I will be in touch. I'll keep you informed as to what's going on. Sounds like you're following along anyway, but, we'll see what happens. The process is underway,
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, and I think there's
that-
a very good potential to come out with a better, well, I mean, it's almost impossible to have a worse bill than what we've been working on for 50 years,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's old.
you can fish these nets in some little corner of Saginaw
Yeah,
Bay,
right,
but
right.
not in this other, you know, I mean, in statute, really?
Yeah, so, we're on our way.
Just a quick change of gears here on transportation. I don't think any Michigan resident wants to see bridges sold off or toll booths
No.
on our roads. But
Absolutely not.
every time I travel on the highways around here, the weigh stations are closed, or they're only pulling in, follow in cab signals, 1 in 5 trucks go in. Where are they at weight limits and decreasing the weight limits if possible on these trucks, or charging? I'm sure trucking companies finance some candidates somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
And so what can you do to resolve the issues of the trucks beating the roads up as
right.
much as
Yeah,
they do?
and
Cars
I
are 4,000 pounds, trucks are maybe 40,000, I don't
And
know.
I have a follow-up to that, because I wanted to ask this question also. Is there any thought to establishing truck routes so that the heavy trucks aren't rolling on 641 or, you know, our local roads here, beating them up?
Well, the answer, I'll try and answer all of these.
Okay.
First of all, trucks gotta deliver, and trucks gotta deliver. Certain trucks aren't, in the state of Michigan, there are 112,000 commercial vehicles licensed. Of those, 6% are licensed and pay accordingly, above and beyond, to be overweight. 2% of them are licensed and pay accordingly to be at the top end. Most of those trucks that are hauling aggregates. Because, and that we can argue the 180 versus 80, 164 pounds versus 8,000 pounds is with the axle limits. And I've done a lot of research on this, I've talked to a lot of people, and the answer to our truck weights is this. They say if, depending on the axle, each axle distributes the weight so that there's less weight per axle on the roadway, okay? And everything I've read, talked to, is it boils down to this: 6 of one, half dozen of another. Because if we were to lower our truck weights, we'd have to double our trucks to carry that same amount of goods. The other problem we face in the state of Michigan is we have a massive truck driver shortage, just as we do everything else. There's a little company down in Cadillac called Pinnacle Truck Driver Training. People are getting hired out of there before they even finish graduating. But when it comes to the weigh stations, this is something I learned in the hearings, is the weigh stations might not be open as you see them, but we have 40 weigh in motion detectors spread across the state that are in the highway. And there is discussion that they need more, because even the weighmasters of the Michigan State Police say there are probably trucks getting by us that are overweight, so we need more enforcement. So nobody's gonna argue that. But just so you know, there are 40 of these embedded in the highway. And last year, they had 2.7 million scans, 36,000 inspections, and $24.6 million in fines paid. Now, here's the kicker. You know where that $25 million went? Libraries. So, I wish it went to roads, but it doesn't.
Everything costs something.
So the point is, it is happening, but our technology is moving on. Because then if they got a truck that's overweight, they pull them over. They either, if the weigh station is open, they pull in there, or they pull them off to the side of the road and they use the scales right there. So there were 36,000 inspections last year. So it is happening, you just might not see it. Everybody agrees that we need more of these. And I know that the weighmaster, they told me they're putting on, I forget what the number was, but they're putting on more officers so that they can increase more. But what we really need is probably more of those in-road things embedded. And that's up to MDOT, because it's their highway.
Okay, so based on that, it seems as though here in Michigan, we don't have a lot of rail service to take some of the load off of the roads and put it onto rail, which is cheaper than trucks.
There's more rail service downstate than there is upstate.
Okay, yes, but there's a proposed train to go from Detroit up to, through Traverse City up to Petoskey. Where is that at the moment?
As I understand it, it's on the board, but the cost of that would be so astronomical that it is not on the top of the list right now.
Okay.
Because that money in transportation, because remember, transportation,
Would that have to be state supported? Tax dollars from the state would have to go
it
into
would,
that?
some of it, I'm sure it would become a federal, state, private kind of thing.
If it
But
ever happened.
just know that in the transportation committee, under my jurisdiction, is roads, maritime, rail, and aviation. So that is there, but at this
Yeah.
moment, the priority is fixing the roads.
Okay.
So, it's,
But it is gonna be looked at eventually.
I think it has been, but it's like, not right now, we don't have the money for it. So,
Yeah.
and it's, what's interesting is, there is rail service to northern Michigan, but if you look at the map, industrial rail,
Oh,
not
yeah.
passenger, it's there. But if you remember, about 30 years ago, everybody said, we don't need rail, and it wasn't working, and now they're all bike trails, rails to
Yeah,
trails.
right,
Yeah.
right.
They pulled all that infrastructure out,
Yeah.
and, you know.
And actually, in where I live, is in Omina. And up until the 50s, there was a train running from Traverse to Northport. Every day, you could go into the city, in the morning and come back in the afternoon by rail. And that, when they pulled that route out of there, they actually returned the land to the property owners along the way. So it's no longer even public.
So
Publicly
those are
owned.
issues that we have to
Yeah.
deal with. So I will say this on transportation. My fingers are crossed. I'm kind of on the outside of the negotiations because my transportation committee has given 15 different policy and legislative ideas, so I'm kind of following them like they're my babies. So I'm gonna have, I think, some knowledge of what's going on, but not necessarily direct input, because that's for the speaker and the Senate Majority Leader and the governor's staffs to do that. But the governor said 45 cents a gallon with only, that's $2.5 billion with 1.9 going to roads, the other 600 million being pulled out. I think with every penny to the pump, the shifts we're doing, if even half of the things that our committee has proposed get passed, and I'm hoping for all 15, but if we could even get half, you're gonna see the money that is being spent wiser and more, and just smarter. And I think that we started this whole thing talking about just throwing, people say we throw money at things. Let's use the money we have smarter, and it's amazing how much farther that dollar will go. And I'm really hopeful, so I ask you to keep an eye on these negotiations. And I'm hoping that these things come through, because I really think that when you don't just look at this whole budget as a budget, but road specifically, but the plan and the policy we're suggesting, that's how it's all supposed to come together. So my fingers are crossed that this is all gonna work out, and and the other thing, I'll throw this out there too about the roads, is our governor, her plan said 10 years. I've talked to a lot of people in the road business now, both private and government, and they're saying, this could take 15. So when you talk about fixing the roads, they're not gonna be fixed
happen
in the next year and a half to 2 years. It's gonna take time. And the other thing I would say is, and I've talked to a lot of people across the state now, our main roads, our highways, our MDOT roads are in pretty good shape. Yes, there are some that need repair. It's our local and county roads that are the ones that need the most loving. And I think with some of the things that we're suggesting, that gives more flexibility to the locals, and it gets them more money. So I'm optimistic.
Well, it almost sounds like you're in favor of this 45 cent.
No, 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 no.
Don't put that in the
I
paper.
was gonna say, that
Where'd
might
you
get you in
get
trouble
that?
with your base, I don't
No,
know.
no.
No, you're thinking of how we're gonna spend that money.
No, stop.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I want to correct,
What
I
have I
want to
missed?
correct, I got to correct you right now. The governor has her 45 cents. I'm against that. I'm for our plan that says every penny to the pump,
But not a tax increase of any sort.
but not a tax increase of any sort, because we're going to
Oh,
use that
okay.
money to the roads,
I must have missed that.
which will raise, get us to almost, because the 2015 plan is also being implemented, that's still going on. We're gonna be right just shy of that $2 billion mark. And then when you allow the locals, if they choose to more flexibility, we're gonna be hitting those goals without having to raise taxes. And they're gonna be using it smarter, so there'll be hopefully less waste, and our locals will be able to do it.
Shame we didn't do this under the Snyder administration.
Well, you know
I
what?
mean, for 8 years, so, you know, same.
Here's
same
the
tax.
thing, all right, I'm gonna have to go because I gotta get down the road.
I know, I'm not trying to
No,
hang
no,
you.
no, no, no. I had somebody complain, I heard about this complaint, that when I was made chairman of transportation, that was terrible because I had no experience in transportation, which isn't 100% true, because I interviewed a lot of road people, I was a bit of a road nerd. But the person who he was interviewing said, yeah, but you know what? Sometimes it's a good thing because they come back with a new set of eyes. And I'm sitting in our early hearings and I'm like, I see the problem. So
I'm glad to hear you're doing your homework.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's my point is, wait, we're the most restrictive state in what we don't let our locals do. Why is that? You
I
gotta go
think-
back to the McNitt Act of 1931.
I think though that, I mean, one of the things that may have, been behind that act, I don't know, but the one risk you have when you turn more money and more authority over to local people is that the county commissioners get their roads paved, you know?
Well, you know
While
what?
they're in
Well,
office.
that happens in Chicago too.
Then vote them out.
Yeah.
The previous, I know you're moving, the previous road commissioner, person